Tom at the Farm is Xavier Dolan's fourth feature. It is the film that pinpoints the stage in which Dolan began to truly develop as an auteur. Although his previous films definitely felt stylistic, they weren't all that original, mostly coming across as artistic developments of a typical young director trying to find his voice while borrowing from his favorite auteurs, sprinkling in what influenced him here and there, but never adding much from himself besides the emotions he was pouring out in the stories. Sometimes reusing certain storytelling techniques too much, and other times attempting to show too much in the story itself. But with Tom at the Farm, he took a much more contained approach, toning down the stylistic sprinkles while primarily taking inspiration from Hitchcock and actually somewhat finding his voice along the way. The film follows Tom at the farm. Let's just jump through the establishing plot basics really quickly. Tom is gay. Yes, this is relevant. He arrives at the farm located in the rural town his deceased lover grew up in. Clearly in the process of grieving and expecting to continue his natural grieving process with the family of his deceased lover, he instead goes for a rather awkward introductory stage and later learns some unpleasant information regarding the family. The mother of his dead lover was unaware of the fact that her son was gay. She was led to believe that he instead had a girlfriend who was also a mutual friend of Tom's. On top of that, she comes across as somewhat mentally unstable, with her other son, the dead lover's brother, attempting to maintain things stable despite essentially being a psychopath. The psycho makes it pretty clear that he is indeed a psycho the night before the funeral, which ends up with Tom not delivering his planned speech at the funeral and things generally spiraling out of sanity as he eventually gives in and decides to stay with the deranged family despite countless unsettling warning signs. Why did Tom decide not to give the speech at the funeral? Was it actually due to the overwhelming stress and pressure, or did he just want to spite the psycho brother? A combination of both is more likely. The mood that the psycho established stirred away from the sentimental melancholy Tom was expecting. So the pressure he put on Tom the night before and the additional stressful atmosphere he created at the actual funeral most likely pushed Tom into thinking that the situation was beyond, or simply not worth saving for everyone. Especially as his premeditated purpose was to reconnect with his deceased lover spiritually, by himself. The opening segment established that Tom was attending for himself and his lover rather than out of respect for the family, which is one of the reasons why his attachment to staying with the family feels so unnatural.
Ouais, puis la prochaine fois, tu piques une course, là. Essaye donc le champ de soya. On est en octobre. Le champ de blé d'Inde, c'est comme un champ de couteau. Pardon.
The sexual orientation of the protagonist is cleverly used as a plot device. Tom develops a strange and unhealthy attraction to his dead boyfriend's brother, which creates suspense as the film often teases the shocking alternations in Tom's mental state, having the constant dilemma between staying and escaping and thus clouding his moral duty with personal cravings. Utilizing the sexual orientation as a plot device doesn't feel exploitative as it adds further depth to Tom's character, exploring his desperation and vulnerability exhilarated by unexpected trauma. The attraction to the psychopathic brother is fueled by the connection. They were close family, after all, as well as a seeming desperation to rebound and sexually release in order to distract himself from the trauma. It sounds like the right choice at a convenient time. The grief-ridden mother is at first not a reason for staying, but later revealed to be a bit too old-fashioned in her beliefs, with the psycho desperately wanting to maintain his brother's sexual orientation a secret, and even somewhat selfish by wanting to replace her dead son with his friend to avoid the notion of her family being decreased in size.
Tell me what have I done to deserve this? What have I done to deserve this? What have I?
The theme of replacement is the most prevalent here, with both Tom and the mother accepting forced and unhealthy replacement in favor of things being like they used to be, but ironically being much worse. The extent of how unhealthy Tom's mental descent has escalated is highlighted when he invites his female friend to join the family, subverting the expected "let's escape" cliché setup and thus adding to the unsettling atmosphere. Was Tom initially planning to escape with the friend, or was he manipulating her? The enigma formed for these subplots is exceptionally compelling and feels very Hitchcockian. There are even a few visual metaphors sprinkled in here and there, such as in this shot. The emphasis on a dead cow being dragged by the psycho foreshadows Tom's fate, him being dragged along unwillingly by the psycho, with the pain of his emotional trauma and deeply personal dilemma deteriorating his soul, and thus essentially dying inside. Why is the cow suffering? Ultimately for the sake of the mother and the psycho. Why is Tom suffering? Also for the sake of the mother and the psycho. There is a follow-up to this metaphor later on, with Tom noticing a dead calf, picking it up and carrying it, but struggling with the weight as he continually bounces the dead creature up to maintain balance, reflecting the courage of his deteriorated soul, attempting to lift it up from the darkness while maintaining psychological stability. The aspect ratio changes in each of the three sequences they are incorporated in signify the emotional pressure closing in on Tom, while bringing focus onto the physical pressure captured in the actively changing composition. The scar on Tom's face, forming an image of a sort of forced smile, reminiscent of Heath Ledger's Joker, symbolizes his forced approach to being satisfied through replacement, and thus essentially forcing himself to smile when he should naturally go through the process of grief. The fact he gets the scar when running away settles the point at which the mental descent began and when the moral dilemma really kicked in. Tom finally woke up when he realized there is a real threat which could result in lifelong damage. Temporary scars and scratches, psychological manipulation, and sexual jealousy was all seemingly manageable until the tragic story of another love interest of his deceased boyfriend was revealed.
Every time